everyone, my name is Trinity from Trinity Educational Mission, where I talk about the latest research in education. Have you ever met a student like this? They're one of the most conscientious students in the class. They never miss an assignment. They actively participate in class. And yet, somehow, they can't seem to stay engaged in learning very long. On the other hand, there's another student who doesn't appear to be exceptionally smart, yet continues to improve steadily. Why does this happen? Many people would say, if you're conscientious, you'll eventually succeed. And that's certainly true. But the study I'm introducing today asks a slightly different question. Is conscientiousness alone enough to keep students engaged in learning? Today's study was recently published in the International Journal Behavioral Sciences. The researchers surveyed 1,059 undergraduate students at a university in South Korea. They examined 4 important factors: conscientiousness, self-efficacy, internal locus of control, and academic engagement. Now, the term academic engagement may sound a little technical. Simply put, it doesn't just mean getting good grades. It refers to actively participating in class, having the motivation to learn, and continuing to study even when learning becomes difficult. The researchers asked one important question. Why do some conscientious students persevere while others give up more easily? The findings were fascinating. Most people assume that conscientious students naturally become highly engaged learners. But the study found something different. Conscientiousness itself did not directly lead to academic engagement. Instead, conscientiousness first increased self-efficacy. Self-efficacy is the belief that I can do this. It's confidence in your own ability. And according to the study, confidence was a key factor that kept students engaged in learning. In other words, conscientious students do not persist simply because they're hardworking. They persist because they believe I can succeed. But the study didn't stop there. The researchers wanted to understand why students with the same level of confidence still showed different levels of academic engagement. In doing so, they identified another important concept: internal locus of control. This term sounds more complicated than it really is. Simply put, it means believing my results ultimately depend on my own effort. The opposite is called an external locus of control. That's when people explain the results by saying, the exam was too hard. I was just unlucky. It was the professor's fault. The study found that even students with high self-efficacy were less engaged in learning if they believed that external circumstances mattered more than their own effort. On the other hand, students who believed my results depended on my own effort continued learning much longer, even when they had the same level of confidence. In other words, what turns confidence into action is the belief that effort makes a difference. This study was conducted with students from one university in South Korea. In addition, because it was based on a cross-sectional survey conducted at a single point in time, we cannot conclude that conscientiousness necessarily causes self-efficacy, nor can we establish a definite cause and effect relationship. Even so, the study proves an important insight into how we understand student learning. The ability to stay engaged in learning cannot be explained by conscientiousness alone. So what does this study mean for education? First, education should not stop at telling students to work harder. We need to help students experience repeated small successes. When they solve a problem on their own, when they make a little more progress than yesterday, those experiences gradually build the belief that they can do this. And that's how self-efficacy develops. Second, we need to help students connect their efforts with the results. When a student performs well on a test, instead of saying, "You're naturally smart," it's much more helpful to say, "Your consistent effort and preparation really paid off." Likewise, when a student struggles, instead of saying, "You were just unlucky," it's much more educational to ask, "What can we do differently next time?" As a student repeatedly experiences this way of thinking, they begin to believe that their effort truly makes a difference. Third, education should help students believe in their own potential. We often emphasize the importance of being conscientious, but today's study reminds us that conscientious alone is not enough. When students believe, "I can do this," and "my efforts can change the outcome," their conscientiousness becomes lasting engagement in learning. We often tell students, "Study harder," but are we really helping them believe that they can achieve something and that their effort can make a difference? Great education is not simply about asking students to work harder. It's about helping students believe that their own potential and giving them the confidence that their effort can lead to growth. When students have that belief, they continue learning, they keep challenging themselves, and they sustain their learning over time. If you found today's video helpful, please like and subscribe.